His blood remained on my hands when I understood this was merely the dawn of profound sorrow, yet one illuminated by countless revelations. Good morning, my cherished ones. I'm Jacqueline, though everyone here knows me as Grandma Jackie. At 72, I'm here to share a story I've kept locked within my heart for nearly 4 decades. Born and raised in small-town Kentucky during an era when women possessed neither voice nor choice. Today, I call Nashville home, where I reconstructed my existence after everything I'm about to reveal. Before I unveil this tale I've never spoken aloud, I want to express gratitude to everyone who discovered this channel. If you're finding value here, please hit that like button and subscribe so you won't miss future stories from this old soul. Tell me in the comments which corner of America you're watching from. I love envisioning all the distant places this video will reach. It genuinely warms my heart. I entered this world in 1951 within a modest farmhouse in rural Kentucky. My father, Sebastian, cultivated the land: corn, beans, tobacco. My mother, Ruby, laundered clothes for townspeople and crafted quilts she sold at the farmer's market. We lived modestly, yet never lacked nourishment on our table or love within those walls. Raised. Alongside 5 siblings, 3 boys, 3 girls, I was the second eldest. Early on, I mastered caring for the younger ones, cooking, cleaning. School lasted only through 4th grade. After that, my father declared, "Women don't require extensive book learning, just enough so they won't be swindled at the store." Unlike my brothers, who studied as far as their ambitions carried them. The aromas of my childhood, beans simmering, damp earth after rainfall, smoke from our wood-burning stove. We awakened to the rooster's call, slept when the oil lamp flickered out. No electricity, no running water. Water came from the well. Baths in a tin tub. Simple existence, but I knew no other. I experienced my first period at 12. My mother said, "Now you're a young woman. You must be cautious around men." She explained nothing further. I believed I was dying from blood loss. I was terrified. Understanding came from older friends in whispers laden with shame and fragments of truth. My father was stern, but never violent. He possessed that solemn demeanor of men from that generation who believed displaying affection revealed weakness. Yet I knew he loved us in his awkward way. My mother showed more tenderness, embraced us, sang lullabies, shared stories after dark. Everything shifted when I turned 16. Suddenly, young men began regarding me differently at the market, at church, at the county fair. I was slender, brown-haired, hair cascading to my waist. Nothing remarkable, but in that small town, any young woman attracted attention. At the 1967 county fair, I encountered John. He hailed from the neighboring town, had arrived with friends for the festivities. Tall, robust, worked construction. He was 22 with a smile that made me forget my own name. "Would the young lady care to dance?" he asked, extending his hand while the bluegrass band performed. I glanced at my father, who nodded discreetly. In those days, respectable girls never ventured anywhere unaccompanied. Hay bales, fiddle melodies, the scent of corn dogs and cotton candy. I danced with John until perspiration ran down my face, until my feet ached. When he escorted me back to my family, I knew something had transformed within me. "May I visit you this Sunday?" he inquired before departing. That Sunday, John appeared at our home dressed in his finest attire, hair meticulously combed, bearing chocolates for my mother. He conversed with my father about work, baseball, life itself. He charmed my younger siblings with jokes and playful games. Mama served coffee, and he praised it as though it were the finest he'd ever tasted. The courtship commenced like that. Sunday visits, always supervised. John would sit in the parlor, me in the adjacent chair, maintaining respectful distance, formal conversation. Sometimes he brought modest gifts, a hair ribbon, exotic fruit, a small notebook for my writing. "Jacqueline, this young man appears decent," my father observed after several months. But proceed slowly. Men promise extensively before obtaining what they desire. Then they transform. I should have heeded my father's wisdom more carefully. During the initial 6 months, John was attentive, patient, respectful. He spoke of his dreams, becoming a foreman someday, owning his house, starting a family. He told me about his father, Dale, widowed for many years, a respected community figure who owned a small general store. My father raised 3 boys alone, John told me with pride. Never wanted to remarry. Said no woman could replace my mother. I found this reverence for his mother's memory beautiful. Little did I realize what this story concealed. I met Dale the day John brought me to meet his family. It was Sunday. I had prepared cornbread to impress them. Dale was an imposing man, taller than John, graying hair, massive calloused hands. He possessed that penetrating gaze that seemed to see directly through people. So this is the girl who's been occupying. My son's thoughts, he said, examining me from head to toe. I felt a chill. It wasn't the look of a father-in-law meeting his potential daughter-in-law. It was the look of a man appraising merchandise. I lowered my eyes as proper girls were taught. Now I know I should have trusted my instincts and fled immediately. The visit felt strange. Dale posed numerous questions. Could I cook, clean, sew? Was I a respectable girl? Did I plan to bear many children? John appeared embarrassed, but didn't challenge his father. His brothers seemed accustomed to this behavior, almost bored. Dad, she's a good girl, John attempted to intervene. Comes from a decent family. I'm simply learning who's entering the family, Dale replied coldly. A woman must understand her place from the beginning. I returned home uneasy, but said nothing to my parents. I assumed it was merely the manner of an older man, that old-fashioned upbringing. How naive I was. The courtship continued, and John requested my hand a year later. I was 17 when we became engaged. He was 23. The engagement was simple. A small celebration at my house with cake baked by my mother, sodas shared in many glasses, all neighbors present. My parents contributed their modest savings to help with the trousseau. John had already managed to rent a small house in town, tiny, just 2 rooms, but it was the foundation of our dream. I married in January 1969, having just turned 18. Simple white dress sewn by my mother and aunt. Borrowed veil from a cousin, bouquet of wildflowers gathered the morning of the wedding. The ceremony took place at the town's little church, small but packed. In small towns, weddings are community events. Dale arrived with his other 2 sons. Throughout the entire ceremony, I felt his gaze upon me, as if he were evaluating whether I was worthy of his son. No smile, no gesture of approval, just that cold, calculating stare. At the reception, following the ceremony, he drank more than everyone else. He didn't become falling down drunk, but that type of talkative intoxication where people reveal their true thoughts. At one point, he approached John and me. "Now you have responsibility, boy," he said, gripping his son's shoulder tightly. "A woman is like an untamed animal, needs a firm hand from the start, or she'll take control." John laughed awkwardly. I pretended not to hear, as women of that era were trained to do. I swallowed those words along with the wedding cake. The wedding night was like many of that era, frightening, painful, filled with ignorance on both sides. John wasn't intentionally cruel, but he also didn't know what to do beyond what he'd heard from other men. I knew nothing beyond the lie still and endure it that older women whispered to brides. I awakened the next day as a wife, a married woman, a housewife. The life ahead seemed predetermined. Tend the house, the husband, bear children, repeat the cycle I witnessed in all the women surrounding me. The first months were about adjustment. John worked Monday through Saturday, departed before sunrise, returned after darkness fell. I maintained the house, prepared meals, washed clothes. Sometimes I created embroidery to sell and supplement our income, but John disapproved. Said it suggested he couldn't support the household. Once monthly, we visited Dale. Those visits were always tense for me. He examined his son's home with a critical eye, ran his finger over furniture searching for dust, inspected pots to see if they were properly scrubbed. "You can judge a woman by the kitchen she maintains," he'd say, as if I weren't present. When John wasn't around, Dale made comments that left me uncomfortable. A good wife would have already given me a grandson to hold, or, "You're too thin like that. Men prefer some meat to grasp." I endured everything silently. He was my husband's father, deserved respect. That's what they had taught me. Besides, I feared him, feared that look, those massive hands, that authority he wielded. Things became strange when I conceived at the end of 1969. John was radiant, treated me like I was made of glass. Dale, upon learning the news, came to visit, something he never did, always waited for us to come to him. "Now you're finally a complete woman," he said, studying my still flat belly. "I hope it's a boy. There are already too many women in this world." The pregnancy was difficult. Constant nausea, weakness, pains that came and went. The town doctor said it was normal, that I was very young and my body was adapting. John worried, but needed to work. I spent most of those months alone, managing the discomfort as best I could. Dale began appearing more frequently. He brought things for the baby, a wooden crib he'd crafted himself, little clothes he'd saved from his sons, a rocking horse in case it was a boy. Always when John wasn't there. Always with that look that disturbed me. "A pregnant girl needs care," he said. "My son works too much, can't always be here." On one of those visits, during my 5th month of pregnancy, he brought a bottle of homemade wine. For strength, he insisted when I refused. Pregnant women need strong blood. I accepted a small glass to avoid seeming ungrateful. The taste was strange, too potent. 2 hours later, I began experiencing intense pains, bleeding. Dale had already departed. I screamed for help until a neighbor heard. I lost the baby that night. The doctor said, "It happens. Many women lose their first." Nobody questioned the wine, not even me at the time. Only years later, remembering, did the pieces fit together. John was devastated, but recovered quickly, the way men do. "We'll try again," he said. "God knows what he's doing." Dale came to the baby's funeral with a solemn expression, but his eyes showed no sadness. There was almost relief. It was after that I noticed the change in John. It began slowly, small complaints, criticisms about food seasoning, about how the house was arranged. He started drinking more, coming home later. At first, it was comments. Then came the shouting. The first slap came when I asked where he had spent the night. Hard across the face, throwing me against the wall. "My woman doesn't question me," he said through gritted teeth. "Learn your place." I cried all night in the bathroom with a cloth in my mouth so he wouldn't hear. In the morning, John acted as if nothing had happened. I also pretended, like so many women before me. That slap opened the door for others. Soon came shoves. Then, punches, always when he drank too much, always followed by repentance the next morning. Flowers picked on the way home. Promises of never again. Rare masculine tears that convinced me he truly felt sorry and I forgave, because that's what women did, because I had nowhere to go. My parents had died in a car accident 6 months after my wedding, because I believed that love was like that, with good and bad parts. Dale knew. I'm certain he knew. During visits, he looked at my bruises poorly. Disguised with long clothes, even in summer, with the thick face powder I used to cover the marks. "A woman has to know how to please her husband," he commented, smiling sideways. "When she doesn't please, she gets corrected." In 1972, I conceived again. This time, John reduced his drinking. The aggression stopped temporarily. Dale kept his distance during those months, which brought me relief. The pregnancy was calmer than the first. In October of that year, our daughter Mariana was born. Beautiful, perfect, with her father's eyes and my dark hair. John was disappointed it wasn't a boy, but soon was enchanted by his daughter. Dale didn't even want to hold his granddaughter when we brought her to meet him. "Girls are just trouble," he said, barely glancing at the baby. "Another mouth to feed that brings no return." With Mariana, I discovered new strength. I no longer allowed John to strike me in front of her, even when she was just a baby. He respected that, took his explosions to another room, but they continued. Happening. Our life continued like this for 2 more years. John working, drinking, alternating between loving husband and aggressor. Me tending the house, the daughter, trying to be invisible when I sensed the storm approaching. Dale visiting monthly, always with those looks, those comments that made me want to lock all the doors. It was in 1974 that everything changed forever. John had just turned 29, I was 23, Mariana was almost 2. It was a Friday like any other. John left for work in the morning, promising to return early to take Mariana to see the fireworks at the town festival. The day passed, night fell, no John. It wasn't uncommon. Many times he went from work straight to the bar. But he had promised his daughter, who waited anxiously, dressed in her party dress. When the clock struck 9 at night, I put Mariana to bed, promising that Daddy would take her to see fireworks the next day. She fell asleep crying. At midnight, there was a knock at the door. It was John's friend Tom. Pale face, trembling hands. "Jacqueline, something happened. There was an accident at the construction site." Tom's words seemed to come from far away, as if he were speaking underwater. Scaffolding broke. John fell from the 3rd floor. My world collapsed in that instant. I don't remember exactly how I got to the hospital. I know a neighbor stayed with Mariana. I know I cried the entire way in Tom's truck, praying every prayer I knew. But when I arrived, John was already gone. Had no chance, the doctor said. Instant death. He didn't suffer. As if that were consolation for a 23-year-old widow with a small daughter. I looked at that body covered with a white sheet and didn't recognize the man I had shared 5 years of my life with. His face was different, deformed by the fall, but the hands were the same. Hands that caressed me and also hurt me so many times. I cried for everything. For the John I met at the county fair, for the loving father he sometimes managed to be, even for the aggressor who repented in the morning. I cried for the future we wouldn't have, for the promises he made on good days that everything would get better. In the days that followed, I lived in a state of shock. The funeral was quick. We didn't have money for anything elaborate. Dale organized everything, paid the expenses. He seemed too controlled, as if he were burying a stranger, not his own son. "Life goes on," he said at the cemetery while the coffin was lowered into the earth. "You and the girl can count on me." At that moment, his words seemed kind, a safe harbor when I was drowning. Little did I know what that offer truly meant. I returned home with Mariana to the deafening silence, to corners that still held John's scent, to his clothes on the line that I had washed the day before. Life had been difficult beside him, but at least I wasn't alone. Now it was just me and my daughter in the world. I had no job, no money saved. John never allowed me to work outside, and the little I earned with embroidery barely paid for material to make more. The rent was due in a week, and the landlord had already come to offer his condolences and remind me that business is business. That's when Dale arrived with a proposal. "Come live with me," he said, sitting in my living room 3 days after the funeral. "The house is spacious, has a spare room since the boys left. Mariana will have better conditions than in this place." I hesitated. Something about the offer caused me discomfort. the same chill I felt when I first met him. But what else could I do? Return to Kentucky? I had no family there anymore, no close friends after being away so long. It would just be until I can find a job, get established. Of course, he replied too quickly. Just until you recover from this blow. A week later, Mariana and I moved to Dale's house. It was on a small farm outside town, isolated, surrounded by cornfields. The house was simple but spacious. 3 bedrooms, large living room, kitchen with wood stove, big yard with chickens and a milk cow. The general store he managed was in the front part of the property, facing the main road. The first days were calm. Dale left early for the store, returned for lunch that I prepared, then went back to work until nightfall. He was polite, maintained respectful distance. He spent little time with his granddaughter, but didn't show the aversion of the first meetings. Kept the house in order, cooked, washed, ironed. Mariana played in the yard, enchanted with the animals, with the space she had never had before. Gradually, the pain of loss gave way to routine, to the necessity of moving forward. I began looking for work, asked store customers, offered sewing and embroidery services. It was little, but I started saving some money, hidden in a cookie tin, saving for our new beginning. Changes in Dale started in the first month. Subtle. At first, a lingering look during dinner, a strange compliment about how the dress marked my body, questions about when was the last time John and I had slept together. "A young woman like you must miss it," he commented one night after Mariana was already asleep. I pretended not to understand, thanked him for dinner, and went to my room, locking the door as I had already made a habit. The uneasiness grew, but I repeated to myself that it was all in my head, that I was misinterpreting because of grief, fear of being alone. The first time he tried something more direct was when we completed 2 months in that house. Mariana had a fever. I had spent the night awake with her. In the morning, Dale offered to get medicine in town. "Lie down a bit," he said when he returned. "I'll watch the girl while you rest." Exhausted, I accepted. I fell asleep almost instantly. In my room, I awakened with the mattress sinking beside me, a weight on top of me. Dale, shirtless, his breath reeking of morning whiskey invading my face. "Quiet," he whispered, one hand covering my mouth. "Don't want to wake the girl." I fought with all the strength I had, struggled, bit, scratched. For an instant, surprise gave me the advantage. I managed to push him, run to Mariana's room, lock the door. He didn't insist that day. He stayed on the other side of the door, breathing heavily. "It was just a misunderstanding," he finally said. "No need to make such a drama." I spent the afternoon locked up with Mariana, terrified. When he left for the store, I took the chance to get water, food, everything we needed to spend the night entrenched in the room. At night, he knocked on the door. Calm voice as if nothing had happened. "Jacqueline, don't be silly. Let's talk like adults. It was an impulse. It won't happen again." I didn't answer. Mariana slept in my arms, her fever finally breaking. I prayed for dawn to come soon, for a chance to escape from there. At dawn, the door opened. I had forgotten he kept copies of all the keys. I woke up with him already inside the room, approaching the bed where Mariana and I slept. "If you scream, if you make any noise, you'll scare the girl," he warned, his voice strangely controlled. "Come with me to the other room. Let's resolve this like grown-ups." I looked at my sleeping daughter. The fear of waking her, of traumatizing her, was greater than my own terror. I got up silently and followed him to his room. What happened that night? I don't have the courage to detail, even after so many decades. I'll just say it was the beginning of a nightmare that would last weeks. When I returned to my daughter's side, I felt I would never be the same again. Part of me had died in that room. In the morning, Dale acted as if nothing had happened. Had coffee, went to the store, came back for lunch. The only difference was the satisfied smile, The look of someone who had proven he could do whatever he wanted. "This will be our secret," he said when we were alone. "Nobody would believe you anyway. The daughter-in-law who came to live with her father-in-law and now accuses him. Everyone will think it's a scheme to stay with the house, with the property." And he was right. Who would believe a young widow without resources against an established man, respected in the community? Even if they believed, what would become of me and Mariana? Where would we go? I started barricading the bedroom door with chairs, tables, everything I could find. But he always found a way. Always had the perfect excuse for Mariana, for the neighbors, for anyone who asked about the nighttime noises, about my swollen eyes from crying so much. "Mommy is sad because she misses Daddy," he told Mariana when she asked why I cried so much. I tried to escape twice. The first time he found me on the road, Mariana in my arms, our small bundle of clothes on my back. He brought me back by force, the girl crying without understanding. "Try again, and the girl stays with me," he threatened when we were alone. "I can get custody. I have friends, money for a lawyer. You have nothing." The second time, I managed to get to the bus stop. I was boarding the bus to Nashville when he appeared with the town sheriff. "This is my daughter-in-law," he explained to the man. "She hasn't been right in the head since my son died. She's trying to take my granddaughter away. Poor little thing." The sheriff, Dale's buddy for years, looked at me with pity. "Better go back home, ma'am. Children need stability." That's when I understood there was no way out, that nobody would help me, that the nightmare would only end when he wanted it to. In the third week of that hell, Dale drank more whiskey than usual. The harvest had been good, the store was prospering. He celebrated alone while I put Mariana to bed. When he entered my room that night, he was more violent than normal. He wasn't satisfied with the usual abuse. He wanted to hurt, humiliate, leave marks. He struck hard when I tried to resist, threw me against the wall, dragged me by my hair. "Just like John's mother," he murmured while he assaulted me. She also played hard to get in the beginning. The revelation shocked me even amid the pain. John's mother, whom he said he respected so much, whom he said was irreplaceable. Had she gone through the same hell? For the first time, I couldn't contain my screams. The pain was too intense, the desperation too immense. Mariana woke up, came to the door, calling. "Mommy, is Mommy hurt?" "Go away, girl," Dale shouted. "Go back to your room." I heard her little steps running, scared. That awakened something in me, a fury I didn't know existed. My daughter wouldn't grow up seeing her mother being destroyed like this, wouldn't live thinking this was normal. In the impulse of rage, I managed to break free. I ran to the kitchen, Dale right behind. Stumbling in his own drunkenness, I grabbed the first thing I found, an iron skillet, still hot from dinner. When he reached me, swaying, smiling that horrible smile, I spun with all my strength. The skillet hit the side of his head with a sound I'll never forget. Dale fell first to his knees, then on his side. He didn't move anymore. I stood there, the skillet still in my hand, watching the blood that started spreading across the cement floor. I felt nothing, no remorse, no relief, no fear, just emptiness. Mariana appeared at the kitchen door, eyes wide. "Is Grandpa hurt too?" I dropped the skillet, ran to her, covered her eyes. "Grandpa fell asleep, my love. Let's go to your room. Mommy is going to pack our things and we're going to travel." I put her in bed, talking about the adventure we would have, about the big city we would see. While she fell asleep again, my mind was racing. What to do now? I went back to the kitchen. Dale remained motionless, the blood forming an ever larger pool. I checked his pulse. Nothing. His neck. No sign of life. I had killed my father-in-law. The man who abused me for weeks. The man who I now realized had probably done the same to John's mother years ago. The man who was respected by everyone, whom nobody ever questioned. I couldn't call the police. Who would believe my version? A widow who kills the father-in-law who gave her shelter. They would arrest me, maybe forever. What would become of Mariana? That's when I made the decision that would change our lives forever. I dragged Dale's body to the yard, to the pig pen where he raised 2 large pigs, big, hungry animals that he fed with scraps. "I'm sorry," I murmured. Not to him, but to some greater force that might hear me. There was no other way. I threw the body over the improvised fence. The pigs approached, curious at first. Then I looked away, but didn't move. I needed to be certain. I went back inside, washed the kitchen like I had never washed before, scrubbed the floor, the walls, everything that could have a drop of blood. I burned my stained clothes, bathed until my skin burned. I packed a small suitcase with our most important things. I took the money I found in the house, not much, but enough to start over somewhere else. I woke Mariana when the first ray of sun appeared. "We're going to travel now, my love. We're going to see new places." "And Grandpa?" "Grandpa stayed to take care of the house. We'll send a letter later." We went to the road, waited for the first bus. Nashville was the most logical destination, big. City where nobody would know us, where we could disappear. While the bus moved away from that place, I looked through the window one last time. The house got smaller in the distance. The store, the yard where I left, buried not only my father-in-law's body, but also part of my soul. Mariana slept in my lap during the trip, innocent, not understanding what we had left behind. I stayed awake, eyes open but not seeing the landscape that passed. I could only see the blood, Dale's glassy eyes, the skillet in my hand. What I had done haunted me, but I didn't regret it. I had protected my daughter. I had survived. And now, for the first time since John's death, I had control of my life again. The bus continued to Nashville, and I continued toward an uncertain future. But at least it would be a future I would choose myself. I carried with me the weight of what I had done, but also the determination to never be a victim again. What I didn't know was that Nashville held its own challenges, that the journey to rebuild my life was just beginning, and that Dale's ghost would follow me much longer than I imagined. We arrived in Nashville on a humid late afternoon in 1974. The bus station was bustling with people, noise, strange aromas for someone coming from a small town. Mariana clinging to my neck, frightened by all the commotion. Me with our small suitcase, less than $100 in my pocket, and my heart heavy with what I had left behind. "Where are we going to sleep, Mommy?" Mariana asked, her tired little eyes from the 6-hour journey. Good question. I didn't know anyone in the city, hadn't planned anything beyond the escape. In my mind, the important thing was to get out of that hell. The rest would work itself out. A lady who traveled beside us on the bus, Mrs. Dolores, graying hair and kind face, must have noticed my desperation. "Do you have somewhere to stay, dear?" I shook my head, holding back tears. I was exhausted, terrified, without direction. "I know a cheap boarding house downtown. It's not luxury, but it's clean. The owner is good people, might give a discount for someone arriving with a child." We followed Mrs. Dolores on a crowded city bus, then through steep hills of downtown. Nashville scared and amazed me simultaneously. Tall buildings, some majestic, others crumbling. Music emanating from everywhere. People on sidewalks, at windows, on corners. So different from the quiet small town I knew. The boarding house was in an old building, peeling walls, wooden stairs that creaked with each step. Mrs. Zelda, the owner, had a face marked by time and a look that seemed to see beyond appearances. "Running." "From your husband, child?" she asked when we were alone. "From my father-in-law," I replied before thinking, immediately regretting the confession. She nodded without asking for details. "Very common. more than people imagine or want to admit. The room was tiny, a single bed, a mattress on the floor, a wardrobe that didn't close properly, but it had a window that caught the breeze from the Cumberland River and was clean. For someone carrying the weight I carried, it seemed like a palace. The first days were about adaptation. Nashville was a world apart. The constant heat, the humidity, the accelerated pace, the different language that sometimes I barely understood. Mariana adapted faster, fascinated with the colors, sounds, movement. Mrs. Zelda helped me find work at a sewing factory downtown. Paid little, but at least it was legitimate employment. I got up at 5 in the morning, left Mariana with Mrs. Zelda herself, who charged a pittance to watch her, and took 2 buses to the factory. The work was exhausting. 10, sometimes 12 hours bent over the sewing machine, always doing the same movements, hearing the deafening noise of machines, breathing fabric dust that covered everything. I came back at night, body aching, fingers pricked by needles, eyes burning. Mariana was already asleep when I arrived. On weekends, I tried to compensate, taking her to walk in the park, to the riverfront, to places that cost nothing beyond bus fare. "You're very reserved, ma'am," Mrs. Zelda commented one Sunday while watching me braid Mariana's hair. "Never talk about the past, about family." "I have no family," I replied simply. "Just me and her." Life continued in a precarious routine, but at least we were safe. Or so I thought, until the 3rd month in Nashville. It was on a hot Sunday in October. We were coming back from the park, Mariana hopping ahead of me, when I saw the newspaper at the newsstand. I didn't usually buy one, every cent was counted, but the headline paralyzed me. Dale's photo, serious, looking straight at the camera, occupied half the page. I grabbed the newspaper with trembling hands, ignoring the vendor complaining that newspapers aren't magazines to read for free. The story said the community was shocked by the disappearance of the respected businessman, that police were investigating murder after bloodstains were found in the kitchen. Worse, it talked about the mysterious flight of the daughter-in-law and granddaughter right after the disappearance. "Police are looking for Jacqueline Ferrer Santos for questioning," said the last paragraph. I let the newspaper fall, picked up Mariana, and ran back to the boarding house. My heart beating so hard I thought it would explode. "I need to leave here," I told Mrs. Zelda as soon as I entered. "Today." "What happened, child? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't tell her. Even to that lady who had been so good. To us, I couldn't reveal what I had done. My father-in-law, he found me. He's going to take me back. It wasn't a complete lie. If they found me, I would be taken back, just to jail, not to his house. Mrs. Zelda didn't ask more questions. She helped pack our small suitcase, gave a little extra money beyond what she owed for watching Mariana. "Where are you going now?" "I don't know. Another state, maybe." "Without new documents, they'll find you wherever you go." "I know someone who can help, but it costs." Almost all the money I had saved in 3 months went to pay the someone Mrs. Zelda knew. A hunched man, reeking of cigarettes and moonshine, who appeared at the boarding house in the dead of night with falsified documents. "Now you're Mary Louise Silva," he said, handing over the birth certificate and brand new identity card. "And the girl is Anna Lucy. Guard these names well. Never answer to the old ones again, not even when you're alone." I quit the factory job. The next day, lost the severance pay, but couldn't risk staying. We left downtown, Mrs. Zelda's kindness, the life I had barely started building. We went to the other side of the city, to a neighborhood near the airport where we rented a small room in the back of a family's house. The following months were of constant paranoia. Every police car, every man who looked too long, every question about my past made me freeze with terror. I slept poorly, ate little, lost so much weight that my ribs showed. I found work as a housekeeper for a family in Belmead. They paid less than the factory, but I could bring Mariana with me. The employer, Mrs. Elizabeth, was demanding but fair. Her husband, Dr. Richard, a renowned physician, barely appeared at home. At home? What home? We no longer had a real home. The rented room was just a place to sleep. We spent our days at Mrs. Elizabeth's house, me cleaning, cooking, washing, while Mariana played in the backyard. We returned late, fell exhausted into the bed. We shared, to wake before sunrise and start all over again. It went on like this for almost a year, the fear gradually diminishing, giving way to physical exhaustion, emotional emptiness. I had escaped hell with Dale. But what kind of life was this that I was offering my daughter? Mariana turned 4 in May 1975. I had no money for a present or a party. I bought a cupcake at the bakery, put an improvised candle in it. We sang happy. Birthday, just the two of us in the stuffy little room. "I wanted a doll, Mommy," she asked with those eyes that reminded me so much of John's. "Next birthday, daughter, Mommy promises." But even as I spoke those words, I wondered if I would be able to keep that promise. If we would still be running, still hiding, still living this half-life where we were always looking over our shoulders, the weight of what I had done, what I had been forced to do, pressed down on me every day. But when I looked at Mariana, when I saw her innocent smile, I knew I had made the only choice I could. I had protected my daughter. I had survived. And somehow, despite everything, we would find a way to truly live again. The story continues, but that's where I'll leave you today, my dear ones. Sometimes the beginning of healing looks a lot like the continuation of pain. But healing does come, eventually. Thank you for listening to this old woman's story. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear what happened next in Nashville, and how we finally found our way to something that looked like home. Until next time, remember, sometimes survival looks like the hardest thing you've ever done. But you're stronger than you know. This is Grandma Jackie, signing off. Life continued at this relentless pace for several more months, until September brought the nightmare I dreaded most. I stood in that cramped grocery store with Mariana, stretching. Our meager dollars as far as they'd go, when I spotted the poster plastered on the community bulletin board. My face, a crude sketch yet unmistakably recognizable, blazed beneath those terrifying words, "Wanted for murder," with a reward plastered. Underneath, the world tilted beneath my feet. The bag of beans slipped from my trembling hands, scattering across the concrete like scattered hopes. "Miss, are you all right?" The store owner approached with concern etched across his weathered face. I couldn't form words. I scooped up Mariana and fled that place as if demons were chasing us, because in many ways they were. I didn't dare return to our tiny room or Mrs. Elizabeth's sanctuary. Instead, I wandered the city streets like a ghost, Mariana growing heavier in my arms with each block. She whimpered about exhaustion and hunger, confusion clouding her innocent eyes. "We're playing hide-and-seek, sweetheart," I whispered, choking back my rising panic. "We mustn't let anyone discover us." When darkness finally claimed the day and my legs could carry us no further, we collapsed in a downtown park. Mariana dozed, fitfully in my lap, while I stared at the Cumberland River's restless waters, fantasizing about boarding one of those distant boats, escaping to somewhere untouchable, starting fresh. But reality crashed over me like ice water. How could I flee with no money, no papers I dared show, and a small child depending on me? Where would we run? How long before they dragged me back? That's when I made the most agonizing yet necessary decision of my life. This shadow existence had to end. I needed to confront what I'd done, face the consequences head on. For Mariana's sake, she deserved infinitely more than a lifetime of running and deception. The following morning, we cleaned ourselves at a public fountain, and I straightened our clothes as best I could with shaking hands. With our final coins, I bought bread that we devoured like prisoners receiving their last meal. "We're visiting someone very important," I told Mariana, who attacked her portion with the desperation of someone who'd gone to bed hungry. Each step toward the central police station felt heavier than the last, as if I were marching to my own execution. In truth, perhaps I was. How can I assist you? The desk officer's suspicious gaze swept over my disheveled appearance. I'm Jacqueline Ferrer Santos, I managed, my voice barely a whisper. You're searching for me regarding Dale Santos's disappearance. Recognition flashed in his eyes like lightning. Within moments, police swarmed around me, wrenching me from Mariana as she screamed my name, metal handcuffs biting into my wrists like the jaws of fate itself. The interrogation stretched endlessly. I laid bare everything, John's violent death, our move to Dale's house, the relentless abuse, that fatal night when everything shattered. Do you possess evidence of these alleged assaults? Demanded the detective, a weary middle-aged man whose tired eyes had witnessed every conceivable human story. What proof could I offer? No witnesses, no scars, just my trembling word against the sterling reputation of a pillar of the community. Exactly as Dale had predicted with his cruel smile. Nobody would believe me. That first night, I shared a cramped cell with 3 other broken women. I had no idea where they'd taken Mariana, whether she was frightened, hungry, crying for me. The desperation clawed at my insides until I retched up what little food they'd provided. The following day brought more interrogation, more skeptical stares, more accusations hurled like stones. The pigs on the property have been slaughtered, reported a younger officer with clinical detachment. We discovered no human remains. Where's the body? They demanded. I spoke the truth. I fed it to the pigs. No body, no murder, the detective commented with a shrug. But we have bloodstains in the kitchen and your flight. That's sufficient to keep you locked away until trial. Those became the darkest days of my existence, worse than Dale's violations, worse than John's brutality, because now I couldn't even glimpse my daughter's face or know if she was safe. A week crawled by before my first visitor arrived, a stern social worker clutching thick glasses and an ever-present clipboard. Your daughter is in temporary care, she announced matter-of-factly. She's adjusting to the routine adequately. When can I see her? That depends on your case's progression and whether she wishes to see you. What do you mean, whether she wishes? She's only 4 years old. We explain situations in age-appropriate terms. That mommy made serious mistakes and must be separated temporarily. My world crumbled further, Mariana believing I'd abandoned her, that I was the villain in this story. It was unbearable. Weeks melted into months without news. No lawyer, no hearing, no movement whatsoever. Just the suffocating limbo of an overcrowded cell, inedible slop, and constant terror. That's when Helena entered my life, a new cellmate with steel in her spine who never lowered her gaze before the guards. She was serving 3 months for theft, and her presence changed everything. Girl, you're wasting away to nothing, she observed on her 3rd day, watching me push food around my tray. At this rate, you won't survive until trial. I shared my story with Helena. What did I have left to lose? To my amazement, she believed every word. More than that, she burned with righteous fury. What they did to you is criminal, she declared. There's an organization that champions women like you. When I walk out of here, I'm finding them. I didn't dare hope. Empty promises echoed constantly within these walls. Everyone swore they'd help once they gained freedom. But Helena proved different. 2 weeks after her release, a lawyer appeared at my cell. Angelica arrived like an avenging angel, wild afro, hair, fierce determination blazing in her dark eyes. She represented a women's rights defense organization, and her first words changed everything. Your story is heartbreakingly common, and we're going to fight for you. With Angelica's arrival, the tide began shifting. First, she secured permission for me to see Mariana. That reunion devastated me. My daughter had grown thin, her hair cropped short, her eyes holding the wariness of someone who no longer recognized me. "You hurt Grandpa," she whispered when we sat alone in that sterile visiting room. "No, baby." "Girl, Grandpa was hurting Mommy, causing terrible pain." "How do you explain sexual violence to a 4-year-old? How do you justify taking a life?" Angelica also arranged my transfer to the infirmary. I was severely anemic, dehydrated, showing alarming signs of deep depression. It was there, in that clinical white room, that I received the crushing blow that nearly destroyed me completely. "Your husband's brothers have filed for permanent custody," Angelica informed me on a rain-soaked February afternoon in 1976. "They're claiming you're mentally unstable, that you fabricated the accusations against Dale." They knew the truth about Dale's nature, but without concrete evidence, it remained my word against theirs, and they possessed financial stability, respectable homes, everything the system valued. In Justice's cold eyes, they could steal my daughter, and they did exactly that. The judge granted provisional custody to Robert, John's older brother. That same day, he whisked Mariana back to Kentucky, far from my reach, without even allowing a goodbye. That night marked my absolute rock bottom, the moment I surrendered all hope, all will to continue. I hoarded the pills from the infirmary, accumulating enough to end this nightmare permanently. When I swallowed them all at once, I felt only relief. But fate had other plans. A vigilant nurse discovered me, summoned help, pumped my stomach, and strapped me to the bed to prevent another attempt. For weeks, I remained in that state, silent, barely eating, hollow-eyed, and broken. The only thread keeping me tethered to this world was the impossible dream of someday holding Mariana again. Then Sister Conception entered my life like a shaft of light-piercing absolute darkness. This elderly nun visited the prison infirmary, bringing spiritual comfort to the forgotten. Deep lines carved her kind face, her hands calloused from a lifetime of service. "God never abandons his daughters," she said, cradling my hands in hers. "Even in the deepest valley, he walks beside you." I felt too broken for faith. What God would permit such suffering? John's death, Dale's abuse, separation from my child. But Sister Conception refused to abandon me. Daily visits, Bible readings, gentle conversation when scripture felt too heavy. Gradually, her unwavering presence became like dawn breaking over a long night. "You must stay strong," she insisted. "Fight for your daughter when you leave this place. When, not if." That single word, when, made all the difference. I began eating properly, responding to treatment, daring to believe that perhaps tomorrow existed beyond these walls. In April 1976, I finally faced my first hearing. Angelica had worked tirelessly, gathering evidence and witnesses. Helena returned to confirm my state when I'd surrendered. Mrs. Elizabeth traveled from far away to testify about my terrified arrival in Nashville, bearing visible marks of violence. The breakthrough came when they located a former employee of Dale's who confirmed suspicions about John's mother's mysterious death years earlier. "It wasn't fever like he claimed," she testified with a trembling voice. "He beat her until she couldn't rise again." Still, the case remained treacherous. No body, my confession under questionable circumstances, my flight attempt. The trial dragged on for months, legal documents flying back and forth like battle standards. In January 1977, nearly 3 years after John's death, I received my sentence. Guilty of voluntary manslaughter with mitigating circumstances. 6 years imprisonment with the possibility of progression to semi-open regime after serving 1/3. Victory and defeat intertwined like lovers. Victory because they acknowledged the mitigating circumstances, the history of abuse. Defeat because years still stretched between Mariana and me. We're appealing, Angelica assured me. This sentence remains unjust considering your ordeal. That night, lying on my hard bunk listening to the prison's nocturnal symphony, I made another crucial decision. I would transform this time into preparation, not merely waiting. These years would forge me into the mother Mariana deserved. I enrolled in the prison education program, devouring everything: English, mathematics, history. Sometimes I studied 12 hours daily. What else did I have? I joined work programs too: sewing, crafts, cleaning, anything that reduced my sentence and allowed me to save precious dollars. Time flowed like this, between books and labor. I saw Mariana only twice yearly when Robert brought her for court-mandated visits. She grew before my eyes in heartbreaking leaps, each visit finding her more distant, more like a stranger. By age 6, she called me Aunt Jackie instead of Mama. In 1979, after serving just over 2 years, I earned progression to semi-open regime. Days meant freedom to work outside, returning only to sleep within prison walls. Sister Conception, my faithful guardian angel, secured employment at the convent. Laundry. That first breath of true freedom in years felt like resurrection. Walking streets, feeling sunlight, seeing the river again, even knowing I'd return to my cell each night. Conditional freedom arrived in 1981. I would leave prison definitively, though still reporting regularly to authorities. Sister Conception offered a room behind the convent in exchange for kitchen and laundry work. I walked through those prison gates on a March morning at 30 years old, feeling like I'd lived several lifetimes. My hair already showed silver threads, my body marked by hardship, my eyes carrying the weight of everything I'd endured. But I was alive, free, and fiercely determined to reclaim what remained of my life, especially my daughter. Freedom possesses a distinct fragrance. That March morning, in 1981, when prison gates clanged shut behind me forever, I inhaled deeply. The air carried river breezes, fresh bread from corner bakeries, infinite possibilities. Sister Conception waited outside, her pristine white habit contrasting sharply with my faded gray dress. Without words, she embraced me, the first genuine hug I'd received in years. "Let's go home," she said. That word, home, sounded foreign to my ears. I had no home, virtually nothing except blazing determination to reclaim my daughter. The Sisters of Charity Convent occupied a humble neighborhood on Nashville's outskirts. Ancient construction with thick walls that maintained coolness even during Tennessee's scorching summers. My room was tiny, Spartan. A narrow bed, small wardrobe, simple table with a Bible. After a prison cell, it seemed palatial. "Stay as long as necessary," Sister Conception explained. "In exchange for kitchen and laundry assistance, when you're ready, we'll help you find another place." I established rigid routine, rising at 5 with the nuns, helping prepare breakfast, then spending most days in the massive laundry among wash tubs and pressing irons. The labor was demanding yet comforting in its simplicity. Evenings meant study. The nuns maintained a modest library and encouraged continuing the education I'd begun in prison. My goal blazed clearly. I needed financial and emotional stability for any chance of recovering Mariana. It wouldn't be simple. Robert and his wife Carmen had raised my daughter for nearly 7 years. She was 11 now, probably viewing me as a stranger, perhaps even the dangerous woman who'd hurt Grandpa, as they'd undoubtedly told her. A month after release, Angelica visited, her afro hair more voluminous than ever, her smile radiating fierce determination. "I've discovered a path to secure regular visitation," she explained, spreading documents across the convent kitchen table. "They cannot deny a mother's fundamental rights, even with your parole status. We're filing a legal petition." 3 months of legal warfare followed. Robert hired expensive attorneys, claiming I was dangerous, unstable, that I would traumatize the child. But the judge, A middle-aged woman with compassionate eyes ruled in my favor. Bi-weekly Sunday visits, supervised by a social worker for now. The first meeting occurred at a Nashville park, neutral territory, they said. I arrived an hour early, too nervous for stillness. I donned my finest dress, purchased from a thrift store with my first savings, applied lipstick, pinned my hair carefully. I desperately wanted to appear normal, stable, trustworthy. When Mariana emerged from Robert's car, my heart nearly shattered. She'd grown so much, transformed from the little girl preserved in my memory. Long hair now, school uniforms replacing the simple dresses I'd once sewn. A pre-teenager, no longer my baby. "Hi," she said, approaching, voice emotionless, eyes evaluating. Me like a stranger. "Hello, my precious girl. I've missed you beyond words." I moved to embrace her, but she stepped back instinctively. Of course she would. To her, I was merely a woman who appeared twice yearly for tense, uncomfortable encounters. The social worker, a gentlewoman around 40, suggested ice cream. We sat on a bench, treats melting in the heat, discussing superficial topics: school, friends, her doll collection. "Uncle Robert and Aunt Carmen are taking me to Disney World for vacation," she shared, excitement sparkling in her eyes. I swallowed hard. I could never provide such luxuries, not even in dreams. When visiting time ended, Mariana hesitated before leaving. For an instant, I thought she might hug me, but she simply waved and ran back to the car where Robert and Carmen waited. The perfect, successful couple, ideal for raising a child. Unlike me, the ex-convict working in a convent laundry, I wept the entire journey back, but I refused to surrender. At our next meeting, I brought a gift, a handmade bracelet crafted in my spare time. For subsequent visits, I always carried small surprises: hair ribbons, homemade sweets, little drawings I'd created. Gradually, tentatively, she began opening up, sharing more about her life, school friends, her favorite teacher. She also started asking about my experiences, why I'd been in that place. She never said prison. "I made a serious mistake," I explained during our 5th meeting, choosing words carefully. But it was to protect myself. Sometimes adults face impossible choices. In December 1981, I received permission for our first unsupervised meeting. I took Mariana to the riverbank, then to an ice cream parlor. She seemed more relaxed, less guarded. She even held my hand crossing the street. "Uncle Robert says you killed Grandpa Dale," she said suddenly while playing in the sand. "Is it true?" I froze. How could I answer? Lying would be easy, but would establish our relationship on false foundations. The raw truth would prove too traumatic. "Your grandfather was hurting me terribly," I finally replied. "Doing things adults should never do to other adults. I defended myself, and he ended up badly hurt." Was he evil? He was sick in his mind. "Sweetheart, he hurt people he should have protected." She remained silent, processing this in her own way, then asked if we could build a sand castle. The conversation was over, for now. While slowly rebuilding my relationship with Mariana, I also worked to improve my own circumstances. The nuns encouraged formal education completion. I attended night classes after exhausting days in the laundry. 1983, at 32, I earned my high school diploma. "You're too intelligent to spend your life washing clothes," said Sister Rosa, the convent's youngest nun who taught at public school. "Have you considered becoming a teacher?" Teaching? The idea had never crossed my mind. In my world, ex-convicts couldn't become educators. Your parole ends in 2 years. After that, nothing prevents it. We desperately need teachers in impoverished neighborhoods. The seed was planted. I began saving every penny, moving from the convent in 1984 to a rented room closer to downtown, securing better employment at an industrial laundry. Higher wages, though more exhausting work. When my parole concluded in 1986, I'd saved enough to enroll in the nighttime teaching program. Days meant work, Nights meant study, weekends belonged to Mariana. Exhausting, but every time I held a book, every new lesson learned, I felt myself finally seizing control of my destiny. Mariana was 16 now, a complete teenager with her own opinions and typical adolescent rebelliousness. Our relationship had improved tremendously. She saw me as Mom again, though she still lived with Robert and Carmen, who'd become her family. Around this time, the whispers began. Sidelong looks, pointing fingers. That one there, the one who killed her father-in-law. Nashville was enormous. Yet somehow my story had leaked. Maybe someone recognized me from trial coverage. Maybe someone from the small town who'd relocated to the big city. Suddenly I found myself branded again. At the teaching program, some classmates stopped speaking. To me. At the laundry, customers requested different attendance. Even at the neighborhood market, I felt stares, heard whispers, shame crashed over me like a tidal wave, the feeling of being subhuman, undeserving of second chances. I considered fleeing again, hiding somewhere else. Ironically, it was Mariana who gave me strength to stay and fight. "Mom, you're stronger than that," she said when I mentioned changing cities. "We've survived much worse. These people don't truly know you." My daughter, so young yet already so wise. With her support, I continued. I completed the teaching program in 1988 at 37. Finding employment proved challenging. Schools hesitated to hire someone with my background, despite having served my complete sentence. But Sister Rosa, always my guardian angel, secured a position at the community school where the convent maintained social programs. My first day as a teacher was terrifying. Literacy class, 30 children between 6 and 8 years old, most from desperately poor families. Many had never held a pencil, didn't recognize letters or numbers. Trembling, I introduced myself. "Good morning, children. I'm Teacher Jacqueline." Teacher. The word sounded strange, imposing. Me, who'd barely had educational opportunities at the proper age, now stood there to teach others. The first week was catastrophic. I couldn't control the class, didn't know how to explain concepts they'd understand. Returned home exhausted and weeping, but I refused to quit. I remembered Mariana calling me strong and pressed forward. With time, I improved. I learned to capture children's attention through storytelling, to harness their energy instead of containing it, to adapt instruction to each child's pace. At the first year's end, when several students read their first words independently, I experienced joy I'd never imagined possible. The teacher's salary wasn't substantial, but combined with my laundry savings, it allowed me to rent a larger apartment in 1990, living room, bedroom, kitchen. Luxury, compared to the cubicles where I'd dwelt. Mariana was 20, studying nursing at university on a scholarship obtained through Robert's influential connections. She spent more time with me now, sometimes sleeping at my apartment on weekends. "Uncle?" "Robert and Aunt Carmen were good to me," she commented one evening while we watched television, "but I always felt something missing." "What? You? Your story, your strength?" I wept, embracing her. My daughter hadn't just returned to my life, she admired me. After everything I'd endured, all my mistakes, my daughter viewed me as an example of resilience. In 1992, I received news that would change everything again. Robert had died, massive heart attack. Carmen, without biological children, was devastated. Mariana, now an adult, decided to stay with her temporarily for support during mourning. "She cared for me for so many years, Mom. Now it's my turn to care for her." My daughter's generosity moved me profoundly. No resentment, no bitterness about the past, just genuine compassion. With Mariana closer and my teaching career established, I began feeling a deep need to confront the ghost still haunting me. Not Dale the physical man, he was dead, buried by my own hands, but what he represented, the trauma, humiliation, guilt I still carried. No matter how completely I'd rebuilt my life, I still felt contaminated inside, forever marked by what he'd done to me and what I'd done to him. I decided to seek help. Therapy wasn't common then, especially for people of humble origins. But through the school, I obtained a referral to a support group for women survivors of violence. In early meetings, I couldn't speak. I simply listened to other women sharing stories painfully similar to mine. Violent husbands, abusive fathers, harassing bosses, women who, like me, had been silenced, blamed, discredited. For many, justice will never come through legal systems, said the psychologist coordinating our group. Our justice must be internal, refusing the permanent victim role. It was revelation. I still saw myself as a victim, first of John, then Dale, then the system. I still believed deep down that my value had been destroyed by them, that I'd forever remain marked, diminished. In 1994, with the group's encouragement, I decided to write my story. Not for publication, not to show anyone, just to exorcise demons, to give voice to the woman who'd been silenced too long. I bought a thick notebook with hardcover and began recording everything. Childhood in Kentucky, marriage to John, Dale's abuse, the escape, prison, reconstruction. I wrote at night after classes, often crying so hard that tears blurred the ink. It was agonizing, yet healing. With each filled page, I felt poison draining from my body, felt I could finally choose how this story would be told, not by the men who'd hurt me, not by the system that punished me, but by my own voice. When I finished 6 months later, I did something symbolic. I carried that notebook to the riverbank one August dawn. Alone on the grass under the still dark sky, I read each page aloud as testimony to the universe. Then I set fire to the notebook and watched ashes fly over the water. You have no more power over me, I said aloud, thinking of Dale, of John, of everyone who'd tried to diminish me. I'm free now. At that moment, for the first time in decades, I truly felt liberated. The rest of the 1990s brought stability and growth. I continued teaching, now experienced enough to handle advanced classes. Mariana graduated nursing school and secured employment at a public hospital. In 1997, she gave me the greatest gift of all, my grandson Gabriel. I want you to be central in his life, she said, placing that newborn bundle in my trembling arms, for him to grow up knowing your story, your strength. I held that child with reverence, marveling at how life completes its circles. Me, who'd been separated from my daughter for so long, now received the chance to be a present grandmother from day one. When Gabriel turned 2, Mariana married Antonio, the child's father, a dedicated doctor she'd met at the hospital, a gentle man who treated her with respect. Exactly what I'd always dreamed for my daughter. In 2000, at 49, I realized another dream, buying my own house. Small, in a simple neighborhood, but completely mine. I paid the down payment with years of savings and financed the rest through a government program. The day I received those keys, I walked through each empty room feeling indescribable joy. "Grandma, is this house really, truly yours?" asked Gabriel, then 3, racing through empty rooms on moving day. "Really, truly, my love. Nobody can take it from Grandma." In 2005, at 54, I retired from the municipal education system. I didn't want complete idleness. Purposelessness frightened me. I began offering private adult literacy classes at home, charging what people could afford, often accepting services or food in exchange. Around this time, I noticed significant change in how the community perceived me. I was no longer the woman who killed her father-in-law, but Teacher Jacqueline, who helps everyone learn to read. People who once crossed streets to avoid me now sought my help. Reading important. Correspondence, teaching their children, seeking advice. The redemption the legal system hadn't provided, the community was slowly offering. In 2010, with Gabriel already a teenager, Mariana had her second daughter, Jacqueline, my namesake, an honor I'd never expected. So she grows up as strong as her grandmother, Mariana explained when sharing her choice. My relationship with my daughter flourished in ways I'd never imagined after our forced separation. We weren't just mother and daughter. We were confidants, friends, mutual supporters. She never blamed me for the separation, never threw my choices in my face. Instead, she consistently showed admiration for how I'd faced consequences and rebuilt my life. "You taught me we can always begin again," she told me once, "no matter how dark the path appears." As I aged, I felt compelled to share my story beyond family circles, not for glory or recognition, but so other women would know they weren't alone, that escape existed even from the deepest abysses. In 2015, at 64, I began participating in conversation circles at community centers, night schools, support groups. I shared my journey without romanticizing, without omitting mistakes, but highlighting the strength I'd discovered within myself. If I managed to survive and rebuild, after all this, I told rooms full of women with looks I recognized well, you can too. Reactions varied: tears, embraces, gratitude, sometimes distrust or judgment. But whenever a woman approached afterward and whispered, "I experienced this too and thought I was alone," I knew exposing my scars was worthwhile. In 2018, Gabriel entered law school, wanting to become a prosecutor specializing in violence against women cases. "Because of your story, Grandma," he explained, "I want other women to receive the justice you didn't have." That same year, I received a surprising invitation to lecture at Vanderbilt Law School about my experience as a woman in the American prison system. Me, who'd barely completed high school, speaking to future judges, prosecutors, lawyers. Trembling with nerves but determined, I shared not only my personal story, but systematic failures I'd observed. How women violence survivors were discredited, how the system punished those who defended themselves, how prison destroyed instead of rehabilitating. True justice isn't only in written laws, I concluded, but in the capacity to recognize the complete humanity of each person entering that courtroom. The response was overwhelming: standing ovation, tears from many students, invitations to speak elsewhere. Suddenly, at 67, I had a new mission: being a voice for the voiceless, especially women imprisoned for defending themselves from aggressors. In 2020, when the pandemic forced everyone into isolation, my grandson, Gabriel, suggested something that would change everything again. "Grandma, why don't you share your story on the internet? Many people need to hear this now, especially with so many women trapped at home with abusers." The idea terrified me. Internet? I barely knew how to use a cell phone properly. But Gabriel insisted, bought simple equipment, taught me basics. Mariana helped organize themes, structure stories accessibly. And so, Grandparents' Tales was born, recorded in my simple living room with my granddaughter Jacqueline often beside me, playing while I spoke. We launched in April 2020 without expectations. The first video had 20 views, the second, nearly 100. The third, where I detailed Dale's abuse, went viral beyond our wildest dreams. Over 100,000 views in 1 week. Messages poured in by thousands from women across America. "Your story saved my life. I watched your video, and today I left home with my children. I thought I was alone until I discovered your channel. Today, in 2025, I'm 74 years old. My channel boasts over 500,000 subscribers. I'm invited to events, interviews, documentaries, not for being an expert in anything or possessing impressive credentials, simply for having survived and finding courage to tell. When I think of that 16-year-old girl who met John at the Mee County Fair, the young mother fleeing terrified with a child in her arms, the desperate prisoner who attempted suicide, it seems like another person. In many ways, it is. From that Jacqueline remains only the essence, the core that survived everything. Because I discovered in the harshest way that we're infinitely stronger than we imagine, that we can lose everything, freedom, family, dignity, and still rebuild, still flourish, still discover purpose. When young people ask if I have regrets, my answer always surprises them. I don't regret what I did to survive. I only regret not believing in my own worth sooner. That's the real victory I achieved against Dale. I didn't just survive what he did, I thrived despite it. I transformed poison into medicine, agony into purpose. And that, more than any revenge, represents the greatest triumph I could have claimed. If you enjoyed my story, please like this video and subscribe to Grandparents' Tales so you won't miss future stories from this old woman. Tell me in the comments what part of America you're watching from.